Question number 3, Alastair Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what recent reports has he received on trends in regional employment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I have seen reports of a rise in unemployment in the South Island, which is not unexpected in the view of very substantial fall in dairy prices and in coal prices. However, we need to keep this in perspective. 30,000 jobs have been added in the South Island in the last 2 years, 44,000 jobs added in the last 3 years, not all of these jobs in Canterbury. The South Island unemployment rate is 4.4%, the same level as it was 2 years ago, but a bit higher than it was 2 quarters ago when it was as low as 3.9%. The South Island participation rate is 70.6%. That is above the highest ever nationwide participation rate. That is, a greater proportion of the South Island working population is available for work than even the record high proportion across New Zealand. And 4 of the 5 regions with the lowest unemployment rates are in the South Island.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Alastair Scott.
To the Minister, what evidence has he seen of skill shortages in some regions?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, labour markets in a number of our regions seem reasonably tight. We've seen any number of anecdotal reports of skill shortages and employers struggling to fill vacancies. For instance, in the South Island, the Clutha District Council recently ran a job fair in Dunedin because, as they said themselves, the Clutha District is awash with hundreds of job vacancies, including up to 350 at a Clutha meat processing plant, that is Finnegan, the largest meat processing plant in New Zealand. So there are clearly across the region some real challenges in filling the vacancies available.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Alastair Scott.
To the Minister, what other reports has he seen on labour market trends, particularly in the public sector?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while the government is doing as much as it can to encourage businesses to employ more people, it's doing as much as it can to discourage the public service inappropriately employing more people. I have seen a report that showed in Wellington the public sector employment increased by 50% between 2001 and 2008. In the subsequent 7 years, from 2008 to 2015, it has increased by a further 3.3% over 7 years, rather than 50% over 7 years.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, could the Minister tell the House by how many staff, by what increase has there been in the number of staff in his department, the Treasury, in the last year?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the first place, I'm pleased to see the member is at least motivated at least about public service jobs, if not about everyone else's jobs. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Treasury, its headcount has grown for 2 reasons. One is functions have been shifted in there from other government departments, and there's been some new centralised functions for the whole government, for instance, data and analytics functions, which are housed in the Treasury.
Order. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston.
Speaker, that minister was asked by how much?
Yes.
It's a very clear question, and he was never required to answer it.
That is true. The question, I can have it repeated if the minister wants it. It was, but that can be an answer. How much has the staff increased at Treasury?
Speaker, I don't have the exact number here.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Alastair Scott.
To the Minister, what measures has the government taken to increase jobs and resilience of the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the view this government takes is that the private sector creates jobs. The government can't and shouldn't just try and make them up because unemployment might be rising a bit for the time being. We've taken many steps, in fact hundreds of individual smaller steps to help businesses create more jobs. For instance, reduced the taxes on work, which was opposed by other parties in the House. We've controlled government, well that's right, they're running the Work Commission to find out what that thing is. We've increased residential building across the country through special housing areas and made a massive investment into infrastructure, which has enabled businesses to export more, to run more efficient businesses and therefore create more jobs. And finally, we've negotiated New Zealand's biggest trade deal, the TPP, to support more jobs in the economy, and the parties who are running in favour of jobs apparently are against the TPP, which is completely ridiculous.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is it correct that there are 11,000 fewer people in employment across New Zealand in this latest quarter compared to the previous one?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I think those are the figures, and that is a bit of a shame because job growth has been so strong for so long. And because we had a soft economy in the first half of this year, job growth has slowed down. But probably the best hope for a lot of those unemployed people is that the TPP is supported by this parliament. And so while Labor's campaigning for jobs, they're campaigning against the free trade agreements that enable those jobs.
Question.